Have you ever wondered how the Chinese literati understand the Renaissance? Besides that, do you know there is also a Renaissance within the China during the Qing dynasty? If you are curious about all this, hello everyone, this is Skyrou's channel. Today's topic is the Renaissance within China and Europe, but within the Chinese scholar's eyes. This video main reference comes from these two gentlemen, Liang Qichao and Jiang Fanzheng. They were both the social elites in China during the early 1900s. For the Chinese people in that era, it is important for them to understand the Europe modernity. And Mr. Jiang thinks we must stay back to the Renaissance to find out the origin. And it triggered Mr. Liang to compare China with Europe. And that's how today's videos come from. Okay, let's start from the European first. The Renaissance is literally means rebirth, and the key word the Chinese scholar likes the most is the liberation. For 1300s to 1500s, why people want liberation? Why Renaissance happened? Because they were unsatisfied with the current era. The corrupt Roman Church was the main target. At first, the Italians stood out. They wanted to revive the classic root. Later, this rebirth trend has swept across the Europe like the ocean wave. So rather than the movement, the Chinese scholar considered the Renaissance as an ideal wave, like the ocean wave, rising from the seashore. So the wave started from the seashore like Italy, then it went to the French, later German, and the whole Europe. They all start with reviving the classic study, and the scholars who study classic usually call themselves humanists. Later, the Renaissance, according to Ms. Zhang category, is split into two branches, the Southern Europe and the Northern Europe. The Southern Europe indicates the Italy, the East Spain, and the Portuguese. The Northern indicates the England, the German, and basically the area above the Italy. French was the coordinator, but later it turned it into the south part. Back to the topic, why the waves separate into two branches? Because the people in each country has different understanding about liberation. The Northerners has a plain lifestyle and devout spirit. They has a strong religious feeling, so they turn to the root of the Christian. The Southerner has beautiful surrounding and they enjoy life very much. So they chose the Greek route. Same reviving different ending, the North chose the Jesus, the South chose the Greek. The most suitable example are Rabelais and Jean Calvin. Rabelais seek true liberation for embracing the nature, following our heart. On the contrary, Calvin said that we must gain our liberation for embracing the God. Sustain your soul. These two roots form the very spirit of the Europe civilization. The Japan scholar briefly summarized the differences between these two roots. So, what's the key conflict between the roots? That is the conflict within the heart. Guiding by the roots, the North and the South defended completely different accomplishments. The Italian has splendid arts, bringing the ideal wave into the art field. They have Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and all the art masters. In the north, the ideal wave made the French and the British literature prosper. Montaigne and Shakespeare all developed their native literature. After the liberation, each country began to seek their unique personality for themselves and the people. That's why Montaigne and Shakespeare wanted to develop their native language. The religion reformation in German, French, and Switzerland arose as well. Europeans wanted to have their own personality and independence from the classical world. This fruit later became the core of the nationalism. So why Reformation religion start from German area? Because the German in that time was in chaos and suffered from the church oppression. The humanists in Germany soon became the Reformation supporter. Humanist income! Religious reformer! It shocked the Christian world. And after Reformation ended, the Renaissance ended as well. Now here come to China. During the 1640s to 1910s, almost the Qing dynasty period, there is also another liberation. This ideal wave in China wants to trace back to the Confucius tradition. This Chinese Renaissance started with reviving too, to refine the classic root. In the 1640s, the beginning of the Qing dynasty, Chinese scholars felt so oppressed by the dominant dogma, but in China, instead of the Roman Church, it's the Neo-Confucianism in Ming Dynasty. People began to break through the chain by restoring the Confucius tradition. In 1700s, this wave just stayed an independent school called Han School of Classical. Yet they just like humanists in Chinese version, they both want to revive the original classic. But unlike the European who trace directly back to the Greece and the Christian root, Chinese scholars trace back to the root step by step. They first questioned the Neo-Confucianism in 1500s and went to the Chengdu school, which is the earlier version of the Neo-Confucianism. Later, after overthrowing the Chengdu school, they finally focused on the original text. And the time has come to the 1700s. The scholar in 1700s tried to find out the original meaning of the text in scientific ways. That is one of the biggest progress in Chinese classical studies. However, there is one confusing thing. Within 215 years, this wave only happened within the classic study. In the West, people trace back to the classical tradition in the beginning, but after that the ideal wave spread all over the area, including the philosophy, literature, and on. However, in China, the liberation wave was very weak. Later, in the early modern, the Han School was crushed down by the Western science. So, what's happening? Mr. Liang in the book lists a lot of reasons, including the political persecution and on. None of them touch the crucial point, I think, but he do inspire me about one thing: the single one root of the Chinese classic. In the last 215 years, the Han School only has one single root of the Chinese classic, and that is the Confucius. This is completely different from the rest. The humanists in the Renaissance need to study both Christian and Greek. So tension in Europe is very great. The conflict is not only between the Roman Church and the humanists, but also the Greek and the Christian tradition. Within the humanists, they were also full of conflict. In short, these two roots intertwine in Europe, and it finally leads to a continuous debate. This conflict within the heart grows stronger and stronger. In the end, it crushed down the old worldview and lead to the modernity. That's why in the West, the great advancement of astronomy unlocked the science revolution. On the contrary, the Chinese scholar didn't give a shit to the astronomy advancement. Hello guys, I just have new discovery on the calendar. Oh, okay. So? Yeah, let's go home and have some dinner. Because in China there is no debate over the fundamental differences. In 1445, Italy, the great supporter of the Renaissance, Medici family built the academy. They wanted to restore the Greek tradition. The Platonic academy does not require the student to follow the same dogma. On the contrary, Plato encouraged diversity of perspectives. The key spirit of the school is not master a concrete dogma, it is free debate, and thus the Greek academy flourished. Later in Renaissance, when Plato meets the Jesus, the whole Europe flourished too. Rich roots and free minds are the key to prosper. So, in the late 1800s, the Chinese scholar noticed that too. Therefore, a new trend appeared, and they tried to refine others' root too. The new wave is called 朱子学. For example, Zhang Bingling lists the Taoists, Monism among with the Confucius. That is just like put the Jesus among with the Socrates and Buddha. All these efforts are tries to rebirth the ancient roots, eager to revive Chinese heart. Chinese scholars tries to talk to the Western again, just like a couple hundred years ago. But unfortunately, this effort failed. Each ideal wave in the modern era didn't provoke a large, long debate. The new power always conquered the old one easily, like the Han School conquered the Yangminism and Chengdu School, and later the New Culture Movement conquered the entire Chinese classic study. Until today, it still works the same. The conflict and debate over the fundamental belief didn't last long. One power quickly arose and conquered the old one. For example, one of the leaders in the New Culture Movement, Hu Shi, said this, and I quote, "When we started this movement in 1917, we expect it would take 10 to 20 years effort to succeed. However, less than 5 years, we have fully triumphed over the battle. Why we have a completely different ending?" That's the question we are still asking today. Okay, here we come to the conclusions. So why both the West and China want to revive the classic root? Because they want to seek the liberation for the current era. More importantly, the liberation within the heart. Reviving the classic is merely an mean to it. Why humans seek liberation then? Because the present is incomplete and we want to rebuild it. So liberation is only an outpost of the rebuilding. Why the era is complete? Because it is lack of personality. When we pursue the personality for human, and the humanists are born. When we pursue the personality for the athletic boot, and the nationalism is born. When we put the sensibility to the nature, the science was born. When we put the sensibility into human nature, philosophy was born too. However, personality is always at war with the world we live in, so humans invent the art to adjust that. That's why Renaissance is born. The Reformation of religion is born. So without the heart revolution, without the birth of the personality, the human will die, and the civilization will fall along with it too. Okay, that's all for today. That's why the scholar in the past wants to study the Europe, and that's why they want to compare it with China. Thanks for watching. This is Sharou channel. If you are interested in this kind of history, welcome to leave a comment below and follow me. Yeah, bye bye. See you next time. Bye bye.